You're listening to the Activities Strong Executive Edition series on the Bridge the Gap Network. The live webinar series aims to promote, engage, and empower wellness directors and senior living executives to continue the conversation surrounding health and wellness in aging adults. This series is powered by Linked Senior.
Welcome to today's Activities Strong Executive Edition webinar. My name is Megan McMahon, and I am the Director of Strategic Development here at Link Senior. For today's webinar, we are providing one free NAV, NCAP, NCCDP, NCTRC, and NZSRDT CEU credit. To be eligible for the CEU credits, you do need to remain on this webinar for the full hour. At the end of the webinar, I will provide the required post-webinar CEU survey evaluation link right in the webinar room chat box. And I will also send you that CEU survey link by email this afternoon. So please be sure to check your spam folder in case it lands there. This CEU survey must be completed by midnight Eastern time this Thursday. If you have any questions, please email us at webinars@linksenior.com. CEU certificates will be issued by email before the end of the day on Friday, February 4th. I will now hand it over to Charles de Vilmorin, CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. Charles?
Thank you so much, Megan. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's Activities Strong Executive Edition webinar. As always, I'm super excited to be here with you. I think there's two higher reasons today why I'm excited. One is the topic, and obviously this is a very, very important topic, is the staffing crisis. So today's webinar is about solving the labor crisis, creating a better culture to attract and keep frontline talent. And the second reason I'm so excited about today's webinar is our esteemed, very valuable, fantastic, awesome, amazing speakers. So we have James Lee, co-founder and CEO of Better Groves, and Charles Turner, who's the CEO of CARE. So as a quick reminder, Activities Strong, this executive edition is all about trying to invite our quote-unquote executives in this discussion about the all-importance of activities and life enrichment and programming. A little bit of background on who we are. So I am Charles de Vilmorin, the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. I started Link Senior 15 years ago now, actually. And with two sets of profound values. One is the fact that, quote unquote, old people are cool. So this idea that we don't want to segregate on anything, even age. And obviously the second thing, the reason why we're all here today, is to empower, acknowledge, and educate activity and life enrichment professionals. So this platform called Activities Strong is in partnership with Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP. And as a quick reminder, our work at Link Senior is to help you engage all of your residents, regardless of the preferences, where we stand physically and cognitively, and we have demonstrated outcomes in the form of a clinical study that was published a couple of years ago. So today's presentation, exciting, as I said, in many regards. I think that the best way to connect it to activities and life enrichment and programming is the fact that when we define engagement, we should never forget that it is about creating this collaboration with the elders that we serve, right? So if you ask any activity professional or any life enrichment professional, what is the quote unquote why, right? Most of you, if not all of you, respond that you show up at work because you want to engage elders and, again, collaborate so they can find purpose every day. So that's my quick word of introduction for today's presentation. I'd love to introduce you both. I'd love to introduce you to both of our, again, amazing and awesome speaker. And I'll start with James. So James, first of all, thank you so much for coming back. As a reminder,
happy to be back.
Everyone, go ahead, James.
Happy to be back.
Yeah, exactly. James was with us back in, I think, January, James, right? January 2021?
1 year ago.
Exactly, 1 year ago. And, James, for me, I like the fact that you're, quote unquote, one of us, right? You started as an activity professional, I remember.
That's right. Yeah, it's and I still describe it as the hardest job I've had in senior living, and I still hold to that.
Fantastic. And obviously our second speaker, who has an amazing first name, Charles Turner.
Yep. Yeah.
And I've had the pleasure of meeting Charles years ago, and in a way considered Charles a friend, but sometimes beyond a friend, also kind of a mentor, where Charles, before starting this fantastic organization called CARE, also worked in senior living, owning and operating different types of buildings. So with that and a quick introduction, I would also share the fact that James and Charles both have a fantastic point of common, which is that they live and work in Texas. And with that, I'll let you both start today's presentation. And thank you again for joining. Charles, it's yours.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, thanks. That was an unnecessary and mostly untrue introduction, at least for me. James is
agreed.
You can go on a lot more about James than me, but yeah, my background, I'll just a little bit more about, I have been, still I am actually, an owner and operator of buildings kind of all over the Sun Belt. Before that, kind of a background in technology. I can't say I'm a technical person at all. But in 2019, a bunch of folks in the industry leaders said, hey, we need to get together and solve this labor problem. We're studying what others were doing in the acute care space, but realizing those solutions would never scale for us. And so that's where we created CARE, CARE with a K. And why is it CARE with a K? There's no reason. We wanted to be obnoxious. And those of y'all who know me know I thrive in being obnoxious and immature for being almost 48 years old. But it's been, we've helped a lot of communities. We're probably in 22 states. We'll be in all 50 states by the middle of this year, hopefully. Helping fill open shifts, way less than a staffing agency, way less than paying overtime, things like that. So, and because of that, we have tens of thousands of folks that work on our platform. And I say folks, meaning frontline caregivers, nurses, CNAs, med techs, LPN, LVNs, RNs, and some hospitality workers in some states. We have a rich, let's call it, database of people to ping and ask questions of. A lot of times you see workforce surveys and we ask the facilities what they think they're doing right. But it's really hard to ask, how do you get a whole bunch of frontline workers and ask them what they think? And so that's where James and I came up with this study, basically asking the questions, okay, we asked the facilities or communities, and we asked the frontline workers the exact same questions, like, why do you want to work for a community? Why do you not? Why do you come and why do you go? And see where they agreed and where they disagreed. A lot of this was commissioned by the Texas Assisted Living Association. And James and I are both in Texas. We sit on some committees there, but it's kind of taken on a life of its own with the study. We've been working with Argentum, we're working with ACA, we've been working with a lot of organizations, and we're actually in the process of adding more, like there's a lot of questions, like we got a great responses, but sometimes James and I are like, well, why did they answer that way? And we kind of let double click down on some of these questions. So you're going to go, everybody loves it when we talk for an hour and we just present charts and graphs. Well, it's a good nap. So I hope we won't put everybody to sleep. But James, I don't know if you have any more color on the origin of this and more about Bearwise and Bella Groves.
Yeah, no, the origin is good. I'll just repeat a little bit of what original Charles said. And I come from an activities background. So I was a caregiver first and then an activities director after that. So this study is very, very personal to me, the results that came through. And the main question we have today, and the reason all of you are on this today, is what does this have to do with activities? So we're going to try to answer that, not just from Charles Turner and I's perspective, but also inviting you. I do recall last time I was on this that it was the fastest, most active chat session I've ever seen. So expecting more of that out of this group. But that is the central question. We're going to present a lot of data, some data and some kind of commentary around what we think are some big takeaways from the study. But I challenge this group to make it relevant to your profession, activities, and let's kind of get there together.
And so I guess without further ado, and my stupid joke I always have to make is, why do we always say without further ado? And what if someone wants more ado?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what ado is, to be honest with you, but apparently we want less of it in our lives. Okay, I'm going to share, let me know, I struggle sometimes with this. Can you all see my screen? Let me do that. Click on point and click.
Yep.
All right, what are y'all seeing?
There we go.
All right, we're good.
Yep.
And I've tried to turn off my Slack notifications, but my company's relentless on Slack, and so they're still popping up. So hopefully nothing's embarrassing. But then you get to see how the sausage is made at CARE. So let's talk about. We talked a little bit about the nature of the study. And the why behind it. And we wanted to dispel, we want to see if there are any myths we need to dispel. And look, as an operator, as a former recovering operator, for me, culture was paramount, right? And we've got to build the right culture. One of the things, and I'll speak for myself, is that one of the big outcomes of the study, and we've cross-referenced this with some other folks, like Best Places to Work and things like that. It turns out the conversation around culture, at least as we define it as an industry, is I'm going to say this and just make people mad, but it's generally a colossal waste of time. We're going to go through that in a little bit. Now, there's some caveats to that, but what I think I always conceived of as culture, and why we couldn't get what I wanted to do as a company down to that frontline workforce, just kind of unpack some of that. We'll get to that at the end, but there are some preconceived notions. Now, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to actually talk about a little bit of the good news, right? A lot of the things that we've been assuming as an industry, gosh, we just can't pay the same as an Amazon or a Walmart or what have you. And so we asked these questions to our frontline workforce, and we asked, are you, if they were going to pay you 20% more, and Amazon or Walmart or something outside of our industry was going to pay 20% more, would you leave? And the interesting thing that this data shows is that by and large, no, they don't want to leave. James made always makes a really good point when we go through this, is that he says, they don't want to leave. They want to stay where they are. They just want to be paid fairly to do that. Now, we can debate what fairly means, and we're not labor economists, but they want to be paid fair. So the reason is something that's not inherent in this, but we do a lot of research and studying sort of the psychological aspects of a frontline caregiver. One of the things that we had a PhD industrial psychologist several years ago said to me, he said, Charles, what you have to understand about a frontline, the general psychological makeup of a frontline worker in senior care is almost identical to the psychological makeup of a drug addict. And at first I got very violently reacted to that strongly, because I thought that was very insulting. He's like, no, I'm not saying they're drug addicts. But he says, if you look at what a drug addict does, a drug addict uses not to feel high, but really to feel normal, or to feel, reinforced. And he says, if you look at a lot of our frontline workforce, he says, a lot of them maybe they have poor life skills, or maybe they struggle with things at home that are out of their control. But he says, when they're in front of a senior and they're providing care, they get a dopamine hit. And that's very, very profound for them. So when they get that dopamine hit, they, again, call it not a high, because that's insulting, but they actually feel reinforced. For one time in their life, they feel reinforced, right? It's not how they react to each other, how they interact with their peers and their management. It's how they react to that senior. And so when you start to understand the psychological makeup of a frontline workforce, it starts to redefine culture. But that's why they want to stay in this industry. They can't get that same dopamine hit, quote unquote, by working in a Walmart. And we see this a lot. People, in care, we have people that work on our platform, maybe part-time, and they work at a retailer or whatever, but they always come back to senior care. Like their mind, this is how I identify. This is This is where I go to. So I thought this is interesting. It's a little more optimistic than we're probably seeing, that people actually, by and large, want to stay in this workforce. James, I don't know if you know any color on that.
You know, the big picture of our study was really to question, do we have different perceptions on the problem? And I think, well, you know, all of us can just kind of intuitively say, yeah, we're owners and caregivers are looking at the problem differently. But what we wanted to do was put some data and substance behind that. So if in our study, in our actual paper that we wrote, we characterized this as, if the results of the owners were a person, what would that person think or feel about caregivers? And so, like, this slide tells you 80% of the kind of leadership believe that, hey, yeah, if somebody else offered 20% more pay, we're going to lose all our caregivers. So if you have that mentality about your workforce, that while pay is certainly important, if owners believe there's nothing we can do, if others pay more, we just simply are going to lose the caregiver kind of workforce issue. But if you look at that compared to what caregivers actually told us, 50% of them agreed, but that's still a 30% discrepancy. And to me, the most telling part about what you see on the screen here is that big orange line on the right-hand side of your screen, that nearly 30% of people unequivocally said, even if they paid more, I strongly disagree that I'm going to leave senior living. So the upcoming slide is also going to question another assumption that I think owners and leaders have, which is, you know, well, because of COVID, all the caregivers are rethinking being in our industry in the first place. So clearly you see a even more contrast than the first question. So I think what this did for us, for Charles and I, when we looked at this, was, first of all, we need to share this with other people, that our assumptions are just wrong. And earlier, Charles said we need to double click and kind of dig to the second level question, which is where we want to go. But I think if we're going to change a problem, we have to question, are we looking at the problem the right way?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You know, this data also reinforces a lot of stuff. There are other studies that say, you know, okay, let's just kind of let's talk about the order of magnitude of what we call the workforce problem, right? Pre-COVID, there was estimated, it was estimated like by 2030 there was going to be a shortage of like 150 some odd thousand, and then by 2040s maybe like twice 300,000 or something. But the problem with that study was that it was only the incremental, like it took like how many workers do we have now, and then how many more do we need kind of with this silver tsunami. What it did not take into account was the folks that are leaving, will be leaving the workforce, just retirement, aging out, et cetera. So the number is really more, I'll call it around 2 million. That was pre-COVID. Okay, so over the next 10, 15 years, we need to find 2 million people to replace and add to the workforce we have. Now COVID hit, and best estimates say that about 15% of our frontline workforce has just left. They categorically walked away from the industry. Okay, so we have a labor crisis. It's here to stay, but we have a foundation to build on, right? And it is that once people are here and they're in the industry and they're providing care and they're getting that quote unquote dopamine hit, they want to stay. By and large, want to stay, right? I think we're weeding out people that may not want to be here, and we're keeping the ones that really want to stay. So we have foundational. So we have to kind of sell ourselves of, you know, if you have a big heart and you want to care for seniors, we have the opportunity for you. And there are more people out there that may never have considered senior care.
Yeah. Yeah. Caregivers have basically told us this era, this COVID time, has made us double down on, we see ourselves in this industry. We want to be in this industry, and we see ourselves in this industry for the long term. So I know how much that probably contrasts with what people are feeling, you know, executive directors, other people on the line right now who are thinking, well, that doesn't sound real at our community because we can't find caregivers to come work here. But think about how often we go and survey actual caregivers. And that's the goal here. That's the purpose of studies like this, is let's actually go ask caregivers what they think. And then what can we do about that?
This reinforces it, right? So we asked the communities, and we asked the caregivers the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. And the, and I think the facility response, they're feeling the pain, right? They're feeling that 15% that walked off. So I think they're when you look at an aggregate, like I need people, and therefore I'm going to take that and apply it macro across my workforce. That's a little more pessimistic than when you ask each individual caregiver, where like, you know what, I don't think it's as bad. I mean, it's bad. Let's not sugarcoat it, but it's not categorically as bad as we think. We're asking the question 5 years from now, will you be one of the things like James and I talk about kind of double click, we're actually about to roll out a kind of a follow-up to this question, because now you have to understand these questions were asked pre-Omicron, they're post-vaccines, kind of pre-vaccine mandates. And so there's been some age, there's been a few months since it's been done. So we're gonna now ask, okay, now because of Omicron, now because of COVID, vaccine mandates, are these numbers changing at all? And also with like PPE requirement, OSHA requirements, and all these things, the regulations that are coming, that are here or are coming, frontline workers say, you know what, I'm just getting tired of this. This is going on and on and on. I'm leaving. All right, we're asking those questions. We don't know the answers to that yet, but we'll see, and hopefully we can kind of report back with the responses to that.
Yeah, in the last time I was here with this audience, I'm trying to recall. I think the title of the presentation was that activities is the secret sauce of senior living, and I believe that. And the basic premise of that was that our industry, for the most part, treats activities as like a secondary offering at the community, and that the care is the most important thing that we do. But my contention is, as I'm sure everyone on this call would probably agree, care is the means to the end. You do the care so that you can have a lifestyle. So so they're not apart from one another. One helps to get to the other. And so the bigger picture, as I see it, is what is life enrichment, activities, whatever word we choose to use to encompass that. How do we get people in our industry to kind of move towards that? So the underlying question there is, how do caregivers feel like activities professionals? I think that is a central premise. The earlier part of this presentation is questioning whether or not caregivers are motivated by the same things that we think they're motivated by. So if we take this as truth, if we accept this as truth, that caregivers want to stay in our industry, they haven't been negatively impacted by COVID to think, no, I'm getting out of here, and they want to stick around. Now the big question is, how do we keep them around in a way they feel like they're doing more than care, that they actually feel like part of an activities culture?
Good.
Yeah, and by the way, I can't see the chat group or the Q&A, so Charles DeVee, if you've got anything in there.
French Charles, we call it.
Yeah, you can call me French Charles, but I did like when you call me the original Charles. I really like that. So
that's bad.
Feel free to do that again.
I'm older. I'm the OG.
Yeah.
I'm the OC.
So obviously in the chat there's a lot going on, which is great. Please keep it up. I would be lying to say that it's all kind of rosy. There's a lot of people painting a kind of dim picture. Yeah, I think you say dim. But I think there's two main things that are coming, which is one, obviously, James, we love what you're referring to when it comes to the secret sauce. Some people were questioning, and maybe this is a question for both of you in terms of the data. Did you include people that had left the industry, right? Is this sample of data only for people that quote unquote stayed, and therefore is the data a little bit skewed there? Or can you respond to that piece? Because I think it's important
So the answer to the question is a little bit, sort of. These are people that are credentialed, know they're credentialed. And we know, again, a lot of it came from the data of the people that work on care. And a lot of people we know, we've done other surveys. We've done some specifically COVID related surveys that reinforce a lot of this data in terms of people leaving. But we still survey the people, a lot of the people on our platform who may be either, let's say, that have left, or frankly, let's call it more sitting on the sidelines. So we do know there is a population. I can't honestly say who and what, because those lines are not as binary as you think. People have left the industry, but gosh, they want to pick up a little bit, make it, I work at, fast food, or I work at Walmart or whatever. I still want to make more extra income. So maybe I pick up a shift or two a week or so using the credential that I have. So you have a lot of that, and I can pick and choose where I want, because like, oh, that's got COVID, that one's not have COVID. So it's an easy question with a kind of an opaque answer, and I apologize.
Yeah, but we did also survey. We sent the survey to TALA members. So Assisted Living Association here in Texas sent out the survey to their own caregiving team. So there's a mix of responses here from people who are currently in assisted living, this kind of middle ground that Charles talked about, and people who have who are in senior living, but through organizations like CARE.
Correct.
Okay, so thanks for saying that. So Charles, just one thing, if you don't mind. So in the chat, there was a lot of people kind of asking these questions, but specifically Kayleen and Martina. So just to be clear, this study, I think what Charles is saying is that, yes, we're not grabbing everybody, but we are grabbing some of the people that have quote unquote left. So the data might be stronger than we were originally talking about in the chat. So thank you very much for validating that.
Yes, that is correct. And again, we have this other COVID study, and we're asking people that, have you left the industry?
Yeah.
Which is not reflected in this numbers, but you can go to our website, like doyoukare.com with a K, go to where, like, I don't know, like news or something like that, and you can download that one for free. You see a lot of those trends. And we're actually, we got, long story, with that study, we asked caregivers basically the exact same question starting in like April of 2020, and then 3 other times kind of throughout the pandemic to see how attitudes are changing, and then we're about to update it again.
Okay.
All right, yeah, because this is a good set of questions. We're hitting kind of a separate, we're shifting gears now to a different set of data. So if there are any other questions on that, please let us know, and the questions on this. So this, the way you read these next couple of slides, you almost like read them right to left, not left to right. And this is where we were trying to expose where there are disconnects between what the communities think workers want and what workers actually want. And remember, and just to clarify the nature of the questions, when we ask communities, we didn't say, hey, why do you think workers come or workers go? That wasn't the question. The question was, why does a worker come to work for you, or why have they left you? So it made it very personal, and we can get, the questions become a lot less abstract and more about that, call it administrator, not just about the industry itself. So you can see, these are where things we see points of disconnect. Pay rate, why do people come? Okay, number one is pay rate. That's not a big surprise at all. But then we start getting into things that are a lot, there's a lot of disconnect with things that, one, do surprise us, and some things that don't. So for instance, we know flexibility and workforce is a big deal. That's why people's like, how do you guys recruit on your platform? In a weird way, it's not as hard as you'd think, because what we do is we provide ultimate flexibility. The vast majority of our people have a full-time job in a community. They just use us to pick up extra income here and there. Like they pick up, I think our average active hero, everybody on our platform is a hero. They may pick up like a shift and a half a week, right? So it's not a full-time job for them. It's something they do on the side to make extra income with that credential. But they love it because we're ultimately flexible. This is some of the things. I go back to my operating days, and my vice president of clinical, who's wonderful, and she's still a dear friend. And I asked her, I said, okay, explain to me why all of our shifts are 6 to 2, 2 to 10, and 10 to 6. The response is like, well, that's when all the residents wake up. That's when 8 hours happens. I was like, well, okay, can we look, just because that's what are the residents waking up because that's when they wake up, or are they waking up because that's when we wake them up? And that's when we do breakfast. And I said, well, let's look at the data. We actually took our nurse call data, that's sort of a surrogate for actual activity, and realized that it's not as clean as that. So, okay, what if you actually staggered your shifts and your onboarding so that maybe you actually have gaps where you're like, we only need someone for 4 hours, or maybe you need someone for 12 hours. So you provide a broader array of shift types where your workforce can pick up shifts that are a little more flexible to their work and have the 6 to 2, 2 to 10, 10 to 6. Again, food for thought, but we never implemented anything. I kind of wish we did. It was too hard to move that battleship, but we did. But then there are other things like the one that always strikes me here as a big disconnect are the benefits, because every frontline worker is like, hey, I come to a building because of benefits, and you'll see later, like they leave because of benefits. But then you ask them, and we don't show the slide on here, you ask them, okay, would you forego, if we basically paid you $1 or $2 more, would you forego benefits? And like categorically the response was, yeah, absolutely yes. I'd rather have a little bit higher pay and then benefits. So I think we struggle a lot with articulating the value of the benefits they're getting. And also I'm looking at what we're paying in wages. Like, what if we just paid everybody's premium, like 100% premium, or like, okay, you can get higher wage and no and you have to cover your own benefits, or lower wage and 100% coverage benefits. Would we actually have a better retention? Again, that's food for thought. Other things on here, like, we see this over and over again. Working with friends, it's not as big of a deal as we think it is. I think there's a big disconnect. I think they're like, we don't really care about our coworkers. We care about management. We'll get to that in a second. But we don't really care about that. And there's actually a heavier emphasis on how nice the facility is. But that surprised me. They prefer, that's more of an emphasis than just, than I think the communities thought as well. And James, I don't know if you had any further insights on these bullets.
Yeah, the one I look at, flexibility of work schedule, I know on the screen it looks like 8.6 to 7.0 is not a big discrepancy, but if you look at it percentage wise, it's 16% difference between what caregivers said and what we owners and leaders thought. So I like to expand my thought on flexibility just from schedule to look at what caregivers value is flexibility. And so again, just my activities hat brings me back to this question of how is this relevant to activities professionals? I think about how do you infuse flexibility to caregivers in their role about how they want to serve residents. So one of the questions I've dealt with at every level of position in senior living is downtime for caregivers. And in a lot of activities, people will tell me, well, I would love caregivers to be involved in activities, but they never have time. They have to run to do this and do that. And so one of the practical ways that our operating company, Bella Groves, is trying to solve that is, yes, we're addressing pay, we're addressing benefits, but beyond that, once people are there, they want to feel good about the work. So one of the things we've done is structure our caregiving ratios we are memory care, by the way, to a 4-to-1 ratio, meaning every 4 residents, there's going to be 1 caregiver. So that means that we have built in downtime. We have said that activities and programming is a critical part of your job, and specific to memory care, you can't always plan it. You can't put it on a checklist. So we, the owners, have to structure the organization in a way that you can do that. So to me, that gets at flexibility. This result on the screen here, when it says flexibility of work schedule, doesn't just mean, can I work a different shift at different times? It also means, do I have flexibility in how I work within my shift? Do I have flexibility of not just running ragged for 8 hours, but also incorporating downtime?
James, there's one comment that's been coming up, and you kind of alluded to that here, which is, I think her name is Tara Weiss. Tara was saying that with the pandemic and the staffing crisis, she's been pulled in different departments, different disciplines like nursing and dining and transportation and so on. And we're hearing that all the time from activity professionals. So there's a joke saying, well, at least you got job security. But I think we could go beyond that and also recognize that this idea of the universal worker model, we've been trying to implement that for years. And I'm hearing from you, James, that you've, as the owner of your organization, you're proactively implementing that in the form of a downtime. Is that kind of a good way of looking at it?
Yeah, I would say So, what is a universal worker? I mean, what do we think a universal worker is? Most organizations probably make caregivers exclusive to ADLs. Your full-time job, 99.9% of your job should be assistance of daily living. So I think, if you think about how many hours a day does a resident receive physical care, ADL support, a universal worker, if you just do it mathematically, you should take that proportion of time allotted for care. So let's say your resident gets 4 hours of care, physical care a day. I'm doing math in real time. So one out of every 6 hours of their day is care related. So then, the other part of it is, okay, well, how much of their time is in what we would categorize as activities? I know it sounds lofty, but in an ideal world, you've got the same mix. So caregivers in a universal role should be allotted that time. Portion of the time equal to resident needs is care. Some of it's dining, some of it's programming, and there's a lot of things. So for our company, Bellet Groves, our caregivers are universal. They do the care, they do the programming, they do the meal service. The specialized roles like cooking or housekeeping or maintenance, we've got people covered for that. But if it has to do with the quality of that resident's day, that's a universal caregiver in my mind.
Cool. As you were talking, a lot of people emphasized how much flexibility was important. Sorry, Charles. Okay.
Yeah, I want to say one. There was a point I was going to get to before that question, and I just remembered it. Talking directly to the people who are on this webinar, more than me wanting you to take this particular study or this specific data back to your organization and doing something with it, I think an aha moment I'd love for people to have is go do your own research, do your own study. Charles and I, before this study, only had just other references to kind of point at and say, hey, look at that study. And now that we did this study, it's prompted more questions, and we're going to go to a second level study. So one of the points I made in the Linked Senior conversation a year ago, which I'll reiterate now, is take control of these problems, put them in your own hands, go get the data yourselves. So if you have questions and you're feeling frustrated about, I'm asked to go do stuff as a lifestyles director, I've got to go do meals and do stuff, but I rarely get it back the other way, survey your own teams, right? I mean, obviously work with your executive director and kind of have a bigger picture in mind, but go get your own data. And I think if we do a better job of understanding our workforce, the teams that we report to every single day, that's the start of providing better solutions. And so Charles and I are trying to do that at a macro level here to help the industry, but you can do this exact thing for your 50 team members in your community, right? So that's one thing I really wanted to say during the course of this conversation is this is one survey, but the bigger thing is find your own information, collect your own data so that you can be part of recommending solutions and not being perceived as complaining about the problem, right? And we issued that challenge to ourselves too.
Cool. So this next set is in a weird way, same set of questions asked negatively, right? Why have you left? Not why have you come, why have you left? Or specifically, remember, we ask communities this, not why do people leave, but why have they left you? Mm-hmm. And so, and that's a very important distinction. So again, we kind of read these things from right to left and sort of the things that kind of everyone agrees with, low pay. Again, even the communities at this point are like, oh, no, we don't provide low pay. They're relative to the frontline workers. Oh, we don't provide low pay. Yeah, they leave the low pay, or we can't do it, or we don't, they just think it's a little de-emphasized for the community. The next two, disrespect for management and poor company facility culture. I want to pause on this because I think those two questions need to be taken sort of in aggregate, because in my mind, they're actually They're the same question. The disrespect for management, again, just to be clear, we didn't ask why do people leave facilities or communities, why do they have left you? And basically in this one, the community said, well, we don't have a poor culture, or I'm not disrespectful. And the frontline workers are going, oh no, you really, really are. And the reason I say it needs to be, I think, taking an aggregate with the next one of poor company and facility culture is because, other research that we look at is how, we'll talk about this in a second, how we define culture, it may be a little different. And so if there's one thing to drill in on, if as a creating a culture, let's not talk so much about how we do fun things. Let's not confuse morale with culture. And culture for the frontline worker is, do you respect me? Do you respect what I do? And so that that I can do my job and get my, again, kind of crude, but get my dopamine hit. Like, don't get in the way of doing my dopamine hit. Honor me for what I do. Okay. So this is one where if I'm the head of HR, one of the first things I'm doing is I'm double clicking into this question. By the way, we actually are. We literally yesterday started formulating the kind of the second level of that one question. Because this is the one that has probably one of the biggest disconnects between the community and our frontline heroes. What does that mean what do you mean when you say disrespect, and which role in the community tends to be the most disrespectful? We have theories, but we don't want to talk about theory at this point. But that's where I said, okay, let's work on that interpersonal relationship. As soon as someone becomes if it's a supervisory problem, let's work on the supervisor. Let's figure out how that supervisor, what are the dynamics that are created because of that. The other thing is, you may think you have a good culture. Again, using our day-to-day care, our communities rate our heroes, but our heroes also rate our communities. If you ever want to see what your culture is like on your knock shift, we've got the data. It can be pretty interesting sometimes as a sidebar. The lack of teamwork from coworkers. I'm going to drill into this one, even though everyone's kind of in agreement. People will leave because of lack of teamwork from coworkers. Let me tell you, from a management standpoint, again, I put my operator hat on. And what's not necessarily reflected in this data, but we do have other survey data that reflects this, is I personally asked 150 frontline caregivers, CNAs, what is the number one thing that makes you mad when you go to work? Basically trying to understand what's a big demotivator for you. I would have assumed, I think everybody assumes, lack of respect. Turns out that's actually number two. The number one response we got, almost verbatim from everybody, out of 150, about 2/3 said the exact same thing. The number one thing that pisses me off when I go to work is when I, excuse my language, literally have to pick up the shit that the previous shift did not do. And so you think about that, like, how would you like to come to work and realize, okay, I got my day plan done, my ADLs, I got to manage, and the activities I got to do. Stop. The previous shift didn't do their stuff. Whether they did or didn't, it's up for debate. Well, here's one of the things that I go back to my operating days, and we have an electronic health record system, just like everybody else does, right? I would challenge, I looked at my data, my communities, that our best nurses and our lowest turnover were the ones where at the end of every shift, those ADLs were checked off in the system before the next shift started. This is a management problem. This is not a worker problem. It's a management problem. Whoever's overseeing ADL management needs to say, no, we're going to build a culture that we close these things out after every shift. So the next shift can start fresh. And I noticed our best nurses, the ones that had the best, the best reviews and had the lowest staff turnover, were the ones that did that. And the ones that had the highest staff turnover, and it was reflected in the data. So I always say, if you're an HR professional, the first thing you need to do, go to your head of clinical and say, let me see your nurse call data and see if there's a correlation, because I bet you there is. Going through real fast, poor health, this is one that kind of shocks me. Again, everybody wants more benefits. I just don't think they want to pay for them, because when you offer a higher wage in lieu of benefits, they're going to take that higher wage every single time. Well, not every single time, but a lot. And then you can kind of see the rest. The other one I thought was interesting, I think there's probably some inherent data skewing, and this was the very first one, is communities saying, yeah, people leave because they didn't like their responsibilities. That's probably true for some people, but I think by and large, I don't think frontline workers don't like their job. So there's a big disconnect there. James, I don't know if you have any other color input on these.
Yeah, I think this is just kind of good compare and contrast to the first slide. But the overall points here are the same as before. And the thing I'll reiterate is go find the data of your team at your community. And the thing I like about research and finding that data is that it's the most objective place you can start from. Emotions are high right now. People are fatigued. People are angry. People are frustrated. So we, like everybody on this call and not on this call, has an opportunity to influence their environment. We can influence that from a position of we're pissed off and we're going to air out our grievances now, or, okay, I'm going to try to do something about this. And a starting point, anybody can take this torch, anybody can take it on their team, but why not us? Why not, you, the lifestyles force of our industry, lead that effort of just finding better information about what's going on your team and have that as a starting point. So that's all I had to say about that particular slide, Charles.
Cool.
Can I add a quick thing here, Charles?
Yeah.
Turner? No, I really love your point here because, to be honest, I knew about it, but I didn't know that that it was before and actually was number one, right? And I think that's this idea of accountability, sorry. And James, like you said, for me and a lot of people I know, it feels like January was a whole year by itself in terms of pardon my English, but crap. It was a very tough month considering the 18 last month we've had before. And there's a number of people, like Renee at one point also talked about the fact that it was management's job to instill accountability. But what you, James, are saying is that we also, as activity professionals, can take the first step, right? That's your message here, correct? It
is. And I think, one of the points we made in our earlier webinar was that, like, for me, I still consider myself an activities professional. I've had a lot of roles since the technical role of life sales director, but I think the way I characterized it before is that you just take on the clothing of the operator or the salesperson or whatever role you kind of grow into in senior living. But that was my mentality. I got into the role of activities and I realized this is the most important thing we do. And because there wasn't upward mobility within my organization from that department, the only other way to get there was I need to keep growing in positions of influence. But at heart, I'm an activities director, and I truly believe that. And that was the advice I gave in the previous conversation, and it's the same one here. Is don't leave it to your regional directors or your HR directors, your VP of people operations to go do these surveys. Get the data yourselves. And I think that kind of approach adds more credibility to anybody coming to the table with solutions.
Yeah, thanks, James.
I throw this up here sort of as a point of discussion. So this is a couple of weeks ago. We took almost about half our company to Cabo. As like our team hit a big goal, like they thought I was joking, and I wasn't. And we ended up taking to Cabo. We had an absolute blast. But this picture, I love this picture because this is for us, is a great reflection of CARE's culture. I mean, we instill this sort of like rock and roll, like us against the world, kind of in your face, bold, orange, obnoxious culture. And this is what we want. And we set goals based on that. And you kind of work hard, play hard, live or die, whatever kind of you want to call it. You start going to the research. I think there are other cultures. Like, let's take this and put it on a senior living community. You can build it, something very similar to this. You can one that say, hey, we're going to be very, technology forward, or we can one that's we're going to be very professional, very hospitality driven. These are all fine, but when we start talking about frontline workers, understand, the research that we have, this is not what they aspire to when they think of culture. First and foremost, what they think of culture is a culture of respect. They see themselves, especially as we're going through COVID, where we have a workforce shortage. They know they can work anywhere. They want to go not where they have the best culture, i.e., like something like this, but where they feel the most respected and honored for doing what they do, and at the same time being compensated for it. And so again, they know that they can go work. They know they can go work down the street for $1 more an hour. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to keep up with that. There's not a lot of ways around it.
I think Charles froze, but I'm not sure the exact point he was trying to make, but I think to carry it forward here on this culture slide, I think the point Charles was trying to make was that, going back to the larger study, our study was challenging perception, and it was challenging what do one group of people in our organizations think, that's the upper management, and what do people at the ground level feel. So Charles has this kind of point about culture is kind of overemphasized or misunderstood. And the thing that I'll maybe agree to as part of that, we lost Charles. The thing that I'll agree to as part of that is, culture is, I think oftentimes we think that culture is top down. And I really do understand why it can feel that way. I've been in a lot of situations where I felt frustrated and just exasperated and felt like there's nothing I can really do about it. But this is the group here, this audience, these are the culture warriors. I saw in the chat group a lot of people kind of superficially refer to it as the fun girls or the fun people. But if we are all about fun, that also means culture. That also means let's go lead the studies on culture. What does it look like at our team? What does it look like for us? And if you want to influence change internally within your organization, you define what life enrichment is. I think I saw that question pop up, is like, how do you define life enrichment? Well, it's defined however you see it for your group of people. So I think Charles is hopping back on here. But I also know we're kind of wrapping up on our time here. Original Charles, we got 8 minutes left. So however you want to kind of direct us to a summary.
No, that's fine. There is a question I do want to ask before the end to actually both of you. Charles, thanks for joining back. Obviously this is a great state of where we stand and what your data shows. And obviously, hopefully things are going to improve. But I'd love to hear from you both. What kind of innovation are you seeing? Charles, I'd love you to spend a little bit more time explaining what CARE is also. And so anything that you feel is quote unquote innovative or that you'd like to see these days that would be a great way to kind of sum it up a little bit.
So if I understand your question, sorry, like most embarrassing thing ever, your internet just goes down. But so you're asking the question of like what innovations that we have to possibly improve some of this, right?
Great. What do you see working right now?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about CARE and what we do, and because again, we have tens of thousands of people working on our platform, and the data we can get from that is that we see a lot of evidence of, I would say, less than optimal behavior by communities. One of the slides, we don't have to show it, but is you actually have so this is the kind of data. These are 2 shift posts. Basically, what happens with CARE is we pre-vetted, pre-qualified, drug background check tens of thousands of people to work on our platform, and a community says, "Hey, I can't fill an open shift." The community sets the pay rate. We don't set the pay rate. And so you decide how much you want to pay a caregiver. And then, I can apply and James can apply, and you see my 5-star rating and James's 5-star rating. You pick James because why wouldn't you? But you get, and then the hero gets paid the next business day as long as they get a 4 or 5-star rating. So it's very, they're reinforced. They get compensated for doing better work. But we also do a lot of meta-analysis on stuff like this, right? That says, okay, these are 2 different shift postings. I won't I mean, this is literally, it took me five seconds to do. Like, clicked on one building, clicked on another building. Look at the shift descriptions. One is, hey, this is what we expected you, and this is the attitude we expect you to have, right? And then we'll honor you once you come. You're a part of our team. You're not separate. The other one is ADLs. Now, if you were a frontline caregiver, which one do you want to work for, right? I think there's a lot of tonality of just how you correspond. Like, I don't know if you guys use OrangeShift or Smart Links or whatever, do staff scheduling, how you do messaging. How do you, look at that? You have the data. You actually have a lot of more, we're all text-based now. How do you honor caregivers? And just look, you just start auditing how people talk to each other. And that's what we do. And we find out, like, I wage agnostic, I'm going to work for the one on the left, not the one on the right. That is, a big way of doing it. And then, of course, we always talk about wages and things like that. That's a whole nother conversation, which we have a lot of macro data on. But I would honestly look at, you already have EHR systems, you already have written communication. I would just audit that stuff and see how people are communicating.
James, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, going back to the continuation of this thought that I consider myself an activities professional, and I've grown into other roles with an ulterior motive to make what I learned about senior living in that role 13, 14 years ago. I've taken that with me to every role. I hope others would believe this, that have worked with me. I've taken that spirit and just added it to whatever role I've been in. And so today I'm able to be the head of an organization we just started, and now we get to test all of that. And so you asked about innovation, and here's my answer to that. Data. We think data belongs to operators or salespeople or whoever. It doesn't. It belongs to whoever collects the data. And so one of the theories that I have is, or we all hold to be true, is that the social determinants of health are as important, if not more, than ADLs. And I think French Charles, original Charles, you made that point sometime before as well. I believe that to be true. I'm going to prove it with data through our company. So how we track our activities, what we even categorize as activities, we're educating our customers about it. And then we're collecting data to compare against other people who aren't collecting that data. So I could really chase that into a rabbit hole, but the succinct way to say this is data is not for the business owners in the suits. The data is for whoever needs it to get their mission accomplished. So if your mission in your heart is that activities is the heartbeat of any senior living community, get the weapons to get your job done.
Yeah, I thank you so much, James, for remembering that. Yeah, we definitely believe wholeheartedly that engagement is as important, sometimes more important than medicine. So thanks for the reminder there. My quick thought, again, that I really like about your presentation and your data is basically the fact that all of this is a conversation, right? Like a lot of what you've highlighted in your presentation today is the unfortunate disconnect between the operator, the frontline people that leave, people that stay, and so on and so on. But what I do like about your work here is also the message of empowerment, right? Basically, there is a difference. It can be solved. It can be fixed. And James, and both you, also Charles, providing tools and explaining how this could be done. And obviously, one of them is data, and one of them is this idea of empowerment. So, I do want to thank you both again for participating in today's, participating, like actually helping us build this amazing webinar and experience. All of you on the audience, thank you so much for joining again. These are the contacts of Charles and James. Please feel free to ask them more details about their study and their work, with the idea that both of them have very tangible tools that can help us go further. And one of them is this tip sheet that they help us put together. So James, Charles, thank you so much again for joining. Awesome presentation, very valuable, very timely. And yeah, so just as a quick announcement, I said that cool and exciting things were happening in Texas. I actually have one of them, and one here, which is that there is a frontier management community that has an amazing activity director who goes by the name of Edward. And Edward, on March 9th, has decided with a former NFL player and their residents to put up a fashion show on the idea that beauty does not go away with age, and sometimes quite the opposite. So all of the information about that particular event, again, March 9th at 2 p.m. Central, is going to be available on our Activity Strong Facebook group. And as a reminder, we recently revamped our whole Activity Strong webpage so you can find all the information about upcoming events. And I do want to highlight this big half-day event we have coming up in 2 weeks, all about validation, all about dementia and memory care. And excited to partner with an organization called the Validation Training Institute. With that, James, Charles, thanks again. Feel free to always be welcome on these webinars. And in the meantime, be well, and wishing you an amazing day.
Thanks for listening to the Activity Strong Executive Edition series powered by Linked Senior. Find more resources and webinar information at btgvoice.com.